Today we are hearing a presentation from Campaign Life Coalition and Human Life International, who we are very excited to hear from. The title of their presentation is The Human Cost of IVF, Ethical, Legal, and Social Implications of Reproductive Technologies. I'm going to turn the time over to their moderator, Kimberly Headley. Please give her your attention.
Good morning, everyone, dignitaries and special guests, and welcome to our side event at the Conference on the State of Women and Family. My name is Kim Headley, and I'm with Campaign Life Coalition. For those who may not be familiar with us, Campaign Life Coalition is a Canadian NGO that works at all levels of government to ensure that the right to life and the protection of the natural family are reflected in legislation and policies both in Canada and abroad. We are grateful for our co-sponsor of this event, Human Life International. HLI is one of the largest international pro-life organizations in the world, with affiliates and associates in over 100 countries and a special focus on leadership training, legal outreach, pregnancy care centers, and chastity education. I would like to sincerely thank the organizing committee of the Conference on the State of Women and Family for putting on this important parallel conference and giving a voice to UN-accredited NGOs who have increasingly found themselves excluded from official UN Women NGO forums. Spaces like this are essential for meaningful dialogue on issues that deeply affect women, children, and families. Before we begin, I'd like to start with a simple but often overlooked reality. Worldwide, millions of embryonic human beings currently exist frozen in storage as a result of IVF procedures. Many will never be born. Today's discussion asks an important question. What does this mean for human dignity, women's health, and the rights of children? In recent years, IVF has increasingly been framed as an unquestioned social good and as a matter of reproductive rights. Yet beneath the language of progress and access lie complex ethical, legal, medical, and social questions. Questions that deserve careful examination, particularly in international policy spaces. IVF is often presented as a compassionate response to infertility. We should acknowledge that infertility can bring profound suffering. The desire for a child is real, powerful, and deeply human. However, compassion must never come at the expense of another human life. Only about 7% of the embryos created through IVF result in a live birth, meaning that the overwhelming majority of embryonic human lives are lost, frozen indefinitely, experimented upon, or discarded in the process. Life begins at fertilization. This reality carries serious moral weight. Each embryo is a distinct and living human being at the earliest stages of development. Yet modern reproductive technologies increasingly treat human life as something that can be produced, graded, selected, frozen, and discarded. Embryos are routinely screened for perceived quality, shipped across borders, or destroyed when deemed surplus. This raises questions about human dignity, the rights of children, women's health, and the role of law and policy in regulating rapidly advancing reproductive technologies. It is also important to note that ethical alternatives exist. Medical approaches such as nanotechnology and restorative reproductive medicine seek to identify and treat underlying causes of infertility while respecting the dignity of both mother and child and honoring the sacredness of maternal bond between husband and wife. Today's discussion will examine IVF from medical, legal, ethical, and international policy perspectives. Our goal is not to simply raise concerns, but to ensure that discussions at the international level fully account for the dignity of women, the rights and well-being of children, and the long-term social implications of these technologies. We will now begin our panel discussion. It is my privilege to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Monique Ruberu. Dr. Ruberu is a board-certified OB-GYN and a Creighton fertility care medical consultant dedicated to providing compassionate, faith-aligned medical care. She earned her medical degree from the University of Texas Medical Branch and completed her residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Drexel University. In practice since 2008, Dr. Ruberu transitioned to nanotechnology in 2015, aligning her medical work with her deep commitment to upholding the dignity of every human life from conception to natural death. In addition to her clinical practice, she is a wife, mother, and pro-life advocate, an author who brings clarity, compassion, and conviction to her work as both a physician and a speaker. Dr. Ruberu, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you today. Thank you so much for attending this amazing conference. As she mentioned, my name is Dr. Monique Ruberu. I am a pro-life OB-GYN. I own a holistic gynecology practice where we treat women for all medical conditions as well as infertility. I was trained as a typical gynecologist, and I was trained through the typical medical system, so typical medical school as well as residency. And during that time, I was obviously introduced to IVF as the solution for infertility. Unfortunately, we come from a very broken medical system. We come from a medical system in which all of the issues that women and men deal with are treated by the medical system in terms of symptoms. We're not trained properly to actually delve deep and look for the root cause of any problem. So when a woman is told you have infertility, the majority of times she has been given a diagnosis of unexplained infertility. There is no such thing as unexplained infertility. That is a complete lie in and of itself. I have treated so many infertility patients in my practice, in my office, and I cannot think of a single one that doesn't have at least 3 things going on just with the woman, not even looking at the man in the situation. Oftentimes when we look at the man, there is another whole slew of issues that we can address. So the thought that IVF is needed for all of these people with unexplained infertility is typically just a thought that you can't solve this without IVF, which I think is a complete lie. The first thing that I wanted to share with all of you is just to give you a basic understanding of how exactly IVF happens. And there are so many issues with this procedure. So first of all, they have the woman come in and she will be given medications to hyperstimulate the production of these eggs so that they can be extracted from her, right? These medications are not completely benign. They can cause a lot of issues for women down the road as well as during that time. Once they have extracted those eggs from the woman, then those are placed on the side. The gentleman is asked to oftentimes use pornography or whatever other method in order to get a semen sample from him. These two are put together and they create embryos. Once the embryos are created, then those embryos are graded. So they will decide which ones are of better quality, which ones are of poorer quality. And at that moment, they will decide if they are going to keep all of those embryos or if they are going to discard them. Typically, when IVF happens, they can't place all of those embryos in at once. So say they were able to create 6 embryos. Of those 6, they will possibly implant 2 in that first cycle. Of those 2, they may just both pass away. They may take off like gangbusters, and they may even divide and create more embryos. So from those 2 embryos, there's a possibility that they may ultimately have 4 embryos in the mother's uterus, correct? Now, when that happens, the next step is the physicians will approach that mother and they will say, now you have an extremely high-risk pregnancy. And if you continue with 4 embryos growing in your uterus, now these develop and we'll see 4 heartbeats, they will say, at this point, we think it's best that you reduce. Reduce is just another word for abort. So now this couple who has so desperately desired a pregnancy, so desperately desired to be parents, they are now faced with a situation where they are being told by their physician that they need to abort for the safety of their children. That otherwise their children will have medical issues, their children will possibly not even survive, the mother's life will be put in danger. So the majority of the time, these women will choose to go ahead and reduce their pregnancies. And they're, in this way, participating in abortion without ever having an intention of having an abortion. They still have 4 more embryos left. And this process goes on and on and on. While they're waiting for the other cycles, those embryos are frozen. And as she mentioned, there are so many embryos just being held in limbo. Every time that they have to thaw those embryos, there's a possibility that there's damage to those embryos. It increases the risk of illness in those future children if they were to be able to come to fruition. It's an endless saga that goes on and on and on. And the cost of IVF is just ridiculous. For one cycle, it can cost anywhere between $3,000 to $16,000 depending on the medications that you need. There are couples that are actually mortgaging their homes in order to have IVF opportunities. Now, I wouldn't tell you all of this and leave you with nothing to hold on to, because I truly believe that life is so precious. And I believe that God creates opportunities for each and every one of us to actually bring to fruition that deep desire to be parents. And for those of us who have challenges with fertility, there is always another path. So as an OB-GYN physician, I am so blessed in my office to be able to offer something completely different from this. As I said before, I never refer to IVF. When I have patients who have done IVF and they come to me and they've been told that they have unexplained infertility, I can always promise you that I can find several things that we can address. Because in our office, what we do is we look for the root cause. We take a full history of this patient. We talk to them about what their bleeding patterns look like, about what the length of their cycle looks like, about the quality of the mucus, because the mucus is the highway for the sperm. We then talk to the husband and we find out about his health history. We check labs for both of them. We look at a full thyroid function panel. We look at insulin resistance. We look at liver function. We look at, are they able to eliminate toxins from their bodies? All of these things impact your fertility. We talk to them about what their careers are. Is the gentleman seated for the majority of the time? Is he unable to get up and walk around at work? Is he sitting in a chair with a seat heater all the time? All of these little things can impact fertility. Even as small as when they have a semen analysis done, typically, it's done and analyzed in terms of IVF. So if you look at a semen analysis and you're looking at it in terms of IVF, you're looking for very small numbers. These men are being told that they have normal morphology, which means do they have 2 heads or 2 tails on the sperm? They're being told that they have normal motility, which means the forward motion of the sperm. They're being told that they have normal concentrations in their semen analysis, but in actuality, that is only normal for the IVF procedure. It's not normal for natural fertility. So that would explain how the majority of these men are being told there's nothing to do for you. They never check a single blood test for these men. They only check the semen analysis, and they're widely just put to the side. But when we come in and we do a full examination and we look to see what is going on in their history, what are their habits, how can we possibly improve their fertility? The majority of the time, we are able to help them conceive pregnancies. And at the very least, even if they don't conceive, they have an understanding as to why they couldn't conceive. They're not given this blanket notion of everything's great, you just can't conceive, which is devastating for an individual. Even if an individual is unable to conceive a pregnancy, we always talk to them then about adoption, about foster, because I truly believe that if they have the desire for a pregnancy and to grow their families, that is a desire that was placed in their heart by God and God alone. And if God has placed that desire in their hearts, it's his very intention to allow them to expand their families and to grow their families. And if they open every door and every window that aligns with him, then he will make it happen for them. So I always like to just offer that amount of hope to the patients. I know that fertility is never an easy option, but things like NAPR technology, understanding how to chart your cycles, understanding how to interpret your cycles, understanding the true benefit of root cause medicine and looking for the underlying issues, which can 100% be addressed and definitely improve fertility at a fraction of the cost. The majority of NAPR technology type treatments for infertility are covered by insurance because you're not addressing infertility, you're addressing the patient's pelvic pain, endometriosis, fibroids, abnormal uterine bleeding. You're addressing the gentleman's hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, all of these different aspects, which naturally would improve your fertility. So I just want to thank each and every one of you for the opportunity to be able to share this information with you. I'll be available afterwards to share more information.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ruberu, for setting the stage and grounding our conversation in the medical perspective. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Josh Wood. Josh serves as Executive Director of Them Before Us, a global movement dedicated to defending children's rights to be known and loved by their mother and father. He holds a master's degree in humanitarian and disaster leadership from Wheaton College and a bachelor's degree in cross-cultural ministry from Messiah University. Throughout his career, Josh has served in nonprofit leadership and church ministry, devoting his work to serving others and addressing complex social challenges with clarity and conviction. He resides in Charlotte, North Carolina with his wife and their 4 children. Josh, we're grateful to have you with us. Welcome.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the human side of the effects of IVF. Not just the embryos that are frozen, but also what IVF has structurally made possible. And so a little thought experiment to start. Many of you who have children, you remember being in the hospital room the day after you've given birth. You're there with your husband or wife, and you are suddenly told, let's say by the doctor, they come in and say, we're ready now, we're gonna swap your child with the one across the hall. So it's just standard procedure, everything's fine, we're gonna swap them. Is that okay? Great, and they do that. You get to go home with the other person's child, and everything moves on just like normal. Why does that produce any level of a gut reaction for you? Why? Like, pause and think. Is that a sentimentality that your child, the one that you and your wife created, matter, and it's that specific child, not just any child that you want to take home? Why? Again, there's so much philosophically wrapped up in that civilizational question with whether that biology matters at all. And IVF is important for this conversation because for the first time in history, a technology has made possible scenarios like that. And further, it's actually encouraged society to not only tolerate it, but to celebrate it as some form of progress. So let's talk about that. Before IVF, reproduction required 2 people, a man and a woman. Their biology had to meet. The child that resulted was connected to both of them. And there was no market mechanism to change that. IVF has changed that architecture. For the first time, every element of human reproduction is separable and saleable. Sperm can be purchased from a catalog, eggs can be harvested from a donor and sold, a womb can be rented through a contract, an embryo created in a lab can be frozen, can be stored, can be transferred to strangers, can be discarded. The child who results may have a genetic mother, they may have a gestational mother, they may have a commissioning mother. These 3 women may never even meet. This is not a hypothetical, this is a standard practice, and it means for the first time in history, a child's biological origins can be deliberately and contractually and commercially all severed before the child is born. And that's not accidental. Right now, that is happening by design to children. Engineered, purchased, and court reinforced. That's the shift. After IVF, all of this was made possible and celebrated as progress. Now, you may have heard the phrase, anyone sex assigned at birth? Is that a phrase you've heard before? It's the language of the transgender ideology, the idea that sex recorded on your birth certificate was not a biological fact, but an assignment. It's something, was not a biological fact, but an assignment, a guess, something imposed on your body by someone else free to revise. Most people push back on that, obviously. But almost no one noticed that family law had made this change generations ago. When donor conception and surrogacy became normalized, courts and legislators began recognizing intended parents, not biological parents, but declaring parenthood, declaring people parents based on their intent through the process. Who paid for it? Who signed the contracts? Who was present through the process and who wasn't? Now birth certificates, the document recording biological facts, were changed to become instruments of adult participation. Biology was reclassified as irrelevant. Parenthood became something else assigned at birth, based on who wants the child, not who made the child. The connection matters because it shows us what's actually at stake. This is not just a debate about reproductive medicine. It's a debate about whether or not children have a right to know who they are. Do children have a right to know their biological mother and father, whose union brought them into existence? Once you accept that parenthood is just another thing to assign, you're agreeing that biology is arbitrary, that a child's origins can just be purchased and rewritten. You've accepted a framework that has literally no floor. Now, then before us, we propose a really simple policy fix to all of this craziness. Every child has a right, a natural right, to be known and loved and raised by their mother and father. It's not a wish, a preference, it's a right. One that precedes the state. The state can only recognize it, doesn't declare it. It's before any contract, it can't be sold, and precedes any adult's desire to complete their family. Now, let's talk about a couple of cases that are real. This is just a few of them. There are hundreds. They're hard to keep up with. That happens when we don't protect that fundamental biological reality, that a child belongs to someone, that should be raised by someone. They have a right to someone. There's a fertility clinic that used no standard labelizing requirements. They were writing on vials by hand in pen and accidentally gave parents the wrong embryo. Baby Shay was born in Florida in 2025 with no genetic connection to either parent. It was only when a second parent from the same clinic came forward with a child matching the skin complexion of the other family that they began to connect the dots. There was a surrogate family in California, a surrogate in California who was contractually prohibited from having sex. She did not follow the rules and conceived her own son naturally alongside the intended couple's embryo. No one knew what to do. So the agency held hostage both children until they could prove, and she paid $9,200 for testing, and she was finally given her son back in a Starbucks parking lot after being separated from him for months. There's also children who can be born stateless. A Canadian father bought an Indian egg donor, their egg, put it into a Kenyan surrogate. Twins were born in Mombasa, and nobody claimed them, and they couldn't get them out of the country. Why? Because there was a man shopping for the cheapest price. A convicted sex offender in Pennsylvania who had sent 12,000 text messages to an underage boy had been arrested, convicted, listed on the sex registry, and was banned from adoption. He was not banned from surrogacy. Used IVF to create a child. He was outed on TikTok, celebrating his first birthday with his son, who he had created. And everyone said, police should go get him. They sent letters to the Attorney General in Pennsylvania. And what they said was, this is completely legal. We can't take the child from him, whether or not he's a sex offender. He's allowed to purchase parenthood using, again, this tool that we're talking about. This child is growing up in that environment still today. The list honestly goes on and on. In Arcadia, California, there was a Chinese couple that commissioned 21 children under 3. 21 children, all in similar, it's like a 2-year time period. They lived in a 17,000-foot mansion, and it was only after multiple trips to the ER with different children for shaking and other injuries that someone was tipped off to go take all 21 children. And they're now wrestling with, what do we do with all the other children that are currently in utero that they commissioned as well? A judge only noticed that a Chinese billionaire had collected over 100 children because he had completed so many birth orders in order, all in a row, that the judge said, how could this be? And they finally checked into it to see that he had commissioned over 100 children, only selecting boys from his IVF empire because he said that they are better than girls. Again, what do the children say about this? I often think that policies like this only survive because the children are too young to object. But they are starting to grow up. They are starting to grow up. There's been a couple of major studies around donor-conceived children that begin to articulate, even if I am placed in a home. Again, this is not necessarily aimed at one specific group. There are men and women who conceive children using a donor that take one or two of the biological connections that a child is owed and raise them in what would all be considered a loving home. Does that matter? Again, it goes back to that initial conversation we had about biology. Is it just sentimentality? Does it matter at all to that child? Well, we can ask them. McKay Braddock was born in Sugar Land, Texas. His mother conceived him through an anonymous donor. And by age 5, he started to ask where his dad was. At school, he made Father's Day cards like the other kids, but he had no one to give them to. So he secretly, without his mom's knowledge, started to make a daddy box. He filled it up for years with cards, a painted rock, an angel ornament with his photo inside. When researchers finally connected him to his father, he finally pulled out the box and said, I've always wanted a dad. Again, more testimonies from a landmark study in 2010 called My Daddy's Name is Donor shares these from donor-conceived children, these quotes. I think of myself as a puzzle. The only picture I've ever known is half complete. My existence represented a verbal contract, a financial transaction, a cold clinical harnessing of technology. I realize I am, in a sense, a freak. I finally understood what it meant to be donor-conceived, and I hated it. This one always gets me. My ancestral home was a glass sample jar. My parents never knew one another in any personal or biblical sense. I couldn't name a single person who shares this strange science fiction style background. I found myself feeling more alone and completely separate from the rest of the human race. What about the kids who watch their mother go through this? Or watch their mother become a surrogate to make it possible for other people? A couple of their quotes. This was done from a study in the UK. You don't want to feel like you've just been bought like a toy. This is a kid talking. Or something, because you're not. You're a human being. That's Scarlett. She was 11. Why does someone else born through surrogacy have to pay for their child to be born? Evelyn, 11. If they don't know and they find out somehow, I think they're going to feel betrayed. That was a son who was born to 2 biological parents, but his mother volunteered to do this to place another child in another home without their parents. They asked him, how might that child feel when they find out? He said, I feel like they're going to feel betrayed one day. I mean, an 11-year-old using the phrase betrayed. Not confused or surprised, but betrayed. Now, what does the data show? 64% of donor-conceived children say my sperm donor is half of who I am. 45% say that the circumstances of their conception bothered them. Twice as likely to have problems with the law. More likely to struggle with depression, substance abuse, and identity confusion. 71% report stress about their donor conception. 46% thought therapy. Only 37% said they felt safe sharing it with their parents in the home. These are all wanted children. All of these children were paid for, intentionally raised, most of them in two-parent households. They were loved children, raised in intact homes. But see, love was not the problem. It was a deliberate severing of an intentional connection of their biology to those two people who created them. A child is two people. They come from those two people. They're a fusion of those two people. And that connection is more than just sentimentality. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh, for bringing forward the perspective of children and the real-life experiences that shape this conversation. It is my honor to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Ursula Cristina Basset. Dr. Basset holds a PhD from the Pontifical Catholic University of Argentina, where she serves as a tenured full professor with special dedication to research in family and succession law. She is also an adjunct professor and director of research projects at the University of Buenos Aires. In addition, she directs the Center for Research in Family Law and the EDFA Law Review at the Pontifical Catholic University of Argentina. Dr. Basset has held prominent public service roles, including serving as Director General for the Human Rights at Argentina's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and as expert counsel in international human rights law at the Ministry of Justice. She is currently Secretary General of the International Society of Law and Family and was a member of drafting subcommittee for the... Okay. Please join me in welcoming
Sorry for that. And then, well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you all for sparing some of your time to reflect on human dignity in what may be its more bare expression. And that is the way life is given, cared for, and transmitted from one generation to another. This, I believe, sorry, I don't know what I did. I will get it right. Yeah. Let's put it here. This, I believe, lies at the very core of law. There is an interesting book written some time ago and very in line with the former presentations. I now remember we met Elizabeth Marquardt, the one who wrote the study with some other researchers about My Daddy is a Donor. She did a magnificent work. But there is an interesting book by the MIT professor Terence Thompson titled Making Parents, the Ontological Choreography of Reproductive Technologies, published by MIT in 2005. In it, the author underlines how in vitro fertilization, IVF, and other assisted reproductive technologies were originally brought about to provide a remedy for infertility in heterosexual couples. And yet, they are the cause of the most significant twists in the understanding of kinship. Another professor, this time in France, Irène Théry, in her book Des humains comme les autres, Human as Others, published in 2015, narrates some of the beginnings of these practices. She recounts the story of an American wife who was unable to get pregnant because of the infertility of her husband. So during the visit to a clinic, she was put to sleep with an anesthesia administered without her knowledge, and while she was unconscious, she was inseminated with the sperm of one of the residents. The woman believed throughout her life that the child was her husband's. People even remarked upon an improbable resemblance between the father and the child. The purpose of these practices was very clear in the beginning. It was about normalizing heterosexual couples for whom infertility was a stigma. What an irony it is to think that these beginnings have led us to the demographic winter we are navigating today. The fact is that IVF and ART became so popular and so profitable that the exploration of the causes of infertility gradually lost interest. But perhaps even more interesting is the fact that while IVF and ART were conceived to normalize heterosexual couples, the outcome has been quite different. Let us go back to Charis Thompson. She puts it this way. The biomedicalization of US society is also changing our notions of identity and kinship. Assisted reproductive technologies have introduced a collaborative reproduction that involves a gamete donor, an embryo donor, or a surrogate, thereby lateralizing descent. The use of grandparents as surrogates and children as gamete donors has made possible the reversal of linear descent when determining kinship. The widespread availability of ART procedures for reproduction without heterosexual intercourse has also helped normalize single and homosexual parenting and kinship. Once the tie between the conception of a child and sexual intercourse is broken, anything becomes possible. The Pandora box is open. What is the aim and what are artificial reproductive techniques? The question may seem obvious, yet it still needs to be asked because it's too often misconstrued. What is the aim of artificial reproductive techniques? Today we know that they are no longer meant to provide a remedy to infertility. We don't even know if there is any infertility in many of the practices. But perhaps they were never truly meant to do so. IVF and ART do not cure infertility. We will never know what might have happened if medicine had devoted itself to finding cures for the various causes of infertility. We're very much in the same line. At the time of the research started, I remember one of the most highly qualified experts in Argentina in genetics stating in 2010 that if medicine had devoted itself to cure infertility, by then it would have been already done. Couples suffering from infertility might have received not simply a child, but the possibility to conceive one. IVF and ART diverted the course of medical research. It may not be too late to bring it back. Italian law, Legge 40, Law 40 from 2004, provided for a fund in order to invest in medical research aimed at curing infertility. This remains feasible. In the law, in this very law, the 40 of 2004, the law starts stating that the aim of infertility, of IVF, is to help parents to conceive when there is no way to cure infertility. So it is a subsidiary procedure, at least for the Italian law. Today, however, in most compared legal systems, the aim of ART and IVF is essentially to provide a child to those who are willing to pay for the treatment and submit themselves to the various practices involved. IVF and ART are medical procedures that assist conception outside sexual reproduction. In doing so, natural processes that occur in sexual reproduction, such as the possibility of failure with advancing age, are bypassed and replaced by artificial settings. And it's important to note that we are not speaking of a single procedure, as it was explained in the former presentation. We often perceive it as a continuum, but ART and IVF involve a number of different procedures connected one to another. From a legal point of view, they imply a chain of commitments and contracts among several persons who become involved in the process, with several stakeholders whose rights and potential duties are obliterated from law and from any discussion, as in your example, in your starting example. It would suffice to know that IVF and ART involving sperm donation have introduced the idea that it can be acceptable for a genetic father to willingly renounce to his fatherhood. Imagine doing this with your adolescent child, once you don't like it, how he behaves. Traditionally, fatherhood and motherhood were not considered disposable because they existed primarily for the protection of the child. In many of our countries, when a father is unwilling to acknowledge his paternity, he may be subject to a civil claim. Yet IVF and ART have created an exception, whereby many legal systems now make fatherhood dependent upon will, what is often described as reproductive autonomy. As an Argentinian jurist once remarked, the law loves symmetry and it tends to recreate it wherever it can. These procedures may include hormonal stimulation, sometimes incompatible with pre-existing medical conditions in women. They may involve the provision of sperm, either by the husband or by a donor. If a third-party donation is involved, this constitutes a separate contractual arrangement. Laboratories may also bear responsibility for excluding donors with genetically transmissible diseases, something that inevitably raises the questions about selection, about the search of the best possible genetic material. The process may also involve the donation of ova by a third party. In some cases, a child may even have two genetic mothers, one who provides the egg and the other one who provides the nucleus of the egg, in order to prevent certain genetic conditions from being transmitted. Procedures may include the hatching of embryonic stem cells in order to conduct genetic screening and select embryos according to predetermined characteristics. I don't know, maybe to avoid transmissible disease, but maybe just to choose. Once again, questions arise about eugenics. Embryos with conditions considered as inviable, such as Down syndrome, for instance, may be discarded. Multiple pregnancies may lead to selective abortion. Surplus embryos may be frozen. Some may even be donated, as if they were things. There are also other practices that raise ethical concerns. The conception of so-called savior siblings that are engendered just to save the other, the brother who maybe is sick. The selection of particular features of the child, and the broader question of the child's right to an open future. We know of cases such as of the deaf couple who wish to conceive a deaf child, or the couple affected by dwarfism who wish to have a child similar to them. But this raises further questions. Should parents try to have the best possible child? Are they responsible if they do not? Are they responsible for conceiving a healthy child? And if not, could they face wrongful life claims? And this has happened already. Is it enough for the child simply to know his or her origin, or does the child have more rights than that? And are the contracts undertaken by parents binding for the children who are conceived as a result of them? Because they are a part of the contract. ART and IVF inscribe fatherhood and motherhood no longer in a logic of a gift, of a donation of life, but in the logic of a contract, presided by the legitimate expectations by the do-this paradigm, usually with rights to sue and obtain redress, as cases of wrongful life and wrongful conception show. Parents bear expectations from the procedure according to the representations they had about what having a child should be. It's thought as a contract. I want a healthy child, and I expect to have a certain life with this healthy child. Pascal and Sermet, a Swiss pyropsychologist, developed the difficulties of the construction of fatherhood and motherhood once bearing a child is inscribed in a contractual scheme. The contractual approach has a clear impact on the sanctity of life. It reshapes our understanding of human dignity, and also the notion of the protection of life, because for every child born through IVF, many other human embryos are necessarily discarded. And that happens by any IVF procedure. This all has been already naturalized. This represents a very deep anthropological change. It affects not only reproduction, but also the very meaning of becoming a parent. New medical protocols now suggest that women in their 30s may cryopreserve their ova, and it has to be told to them. Conception has gradually been denaturalized along with parenthood and the social significance of becoming a mother. If co-responsibility and co-parentality were once considered rights that protected women and children, we now see new arrangement emergence. Lone mothers may enter into a contract with a donor in order to conceive a child and raise him or her alone, as you told us in your example. Now these changes are profound. Let me give one example with which I would like to end my presentation. A couple of months ago, a court of appeal in Argentina ruled that the traditional legal principle according to which motherhood is determined by birth, by the woman who gives birth, constitutes a form of institutional violence. You heard correctly. a form of institutional violence. Because in the case before the court, the woman did not wish to become a mother. The woman in question was poor and had signed a gestational surrogacy contract. Despite the many legal concerns surrounding consent in such cases, often considered invalid, the judges concluded that reproductive autonomy should prevail. In doing so, they effectively legalized the sale of a child, and the industry built around these procedures and the exploitation suffered by the woman itself. Everything changes so that in the end everything remains the same, as the Italian author once said. An Italian author once said, in the end, the price is always being paid by the most vulnerable. The risk losing protections that centuries of legal development in the regulation of filiation sought to establish is at hand. And so we find ourselves returning, in some sense, to the logic of early Roman law. A child belongs to the father who holds the power of life and death over him. And we thought we had left that behind. And so that's where we stay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Basset, for helping us better understand the legal landscape and its implications. It is my pleasure to introduce our final panelist for today, Luis Martinez. He is an attorney general and lifelong advocate for the dignity of every human person. He began his work nearly 2 decades ago when just at 18 years old, he founded a youth foundation in Guadalajara, Mexico. A specialist in consultation law, international law, and human rights, he currently serves as Human Life International's Director for Intergovernmental Organizations in Diplomatic Missions. His academic formation includes studies in the humanities in Salamanca, Spain, a law degree from Universidad Panamericana, and advanced training in human rights and bioethics. In addition to his leadership roles in civil society, he has lectured internationally throughout the Americas and Europe on human rights and the dignity of the human person. Mr. Martinez, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I would like to start by thanking the Heritage Foundation, Universal Peace Federation, and United Families, of course, Marcia, Lisa, Wendy, and Lynn, for this great initiative and event, and for the opportunity to be here gathering ideas, experiences, knowledge, and inspiration. Thanks to all of you for your commitment and your faithful dedication to the mission of defending life and family. And of course, thank you so much to the Campaign Life Coalition members and its Vice President, Matthew. Thank you. It's an honor to join you today to address the human cost of IVF in multilateral UN outcomes. Around the world, assisted reproductive technologies, ARTs, promise hope. Yet they often bring profound ethical, social, and human consequences that UN policy discussions usually they don't acknowledge. Since 1978, with the first baby from IVF, Louis Brown, to now, it had been born around 20 million of little babies, IVF babies, but at a huge human cost. Tens of millions, not in 50 years, but in 1 year. 10 of millions of embryos created, frozen, destroyed every year. I think it's done. Sorry. I will take it out from here. Ready, sorry. Low success rate and increasing medical risks as multiple pregnancies, preterm births, and selective reductions. As we know, there are not selective reductions, but intentional abortions related with the IVF practices. Not to mention the commodification of the reproduction and the separation between reproduction and conjugal love. Reproductive tourism and IVF surrogacy markets expose women, especially the most vulnerable, to exploitation. HLI Human Life International works across around 116 countries to promote ethical alternatives such as nanotechnology, which restores fertility without destroying embryos. The world needs urgently solutions that respect human dignity rather than circumvent it. Let's see a brief global overview before we analyze the UN outcomes. This is not intended to be for me to present it, but for you to have it. It has a lot of information. We don't have the time, but in the first graphic, you could see 4 lines. The bottom one, the red one, is of the embryos created, destroyed, or frozen in millions per year. For example, in 2019, we have 2.3 millions of embryos destroyed in that year. And in 2025, we have 2.9 millions. So it is apparently not so increased, that number, but you can consider that it's almost 30% of change. So talking about embryos, talking about human life destroyed is a lot. And the blue line is about attended cycles that have been also stable, apparently sustaining in 3 millions each year till 2025, 4 millions per year, cycles attempted. I'm not considering 2026 because it's only a projection based on the data before. But this green line is the cumulative births in millions. It's not per year, but in total, all over the time. For example, the number of 2019 is since 1978 to 2019. So we have in that period of time, 12.3 million of IVF children. But now, in 2025, we have already almost 20 million of IVF babies. That it sounds a lot, but if we compare that with the number of embryos created per year, it's enough 1 year, 2025, 28 million babies, million embryos, million human beings to cover 50 years of history of births in only 1 year. The thing that is changing is the average cost of the cycle. For example, in 2021, the average, as Dr. Monique already said, is very, very different. It could be 3,000 in Ireland, but for 40,000 here in the United States. But the average, global average in 2021 was about 21,000. And in 2025, the average declines to 11,000. So all of this data drive us to some trends that are very special because they tell us what really matters to the IVF industry. For example, what metrics are increasing the attended cycles that in 7 years changed, in addition up to 33%, the destroyed embryos that has increased in 30% in 7 years, and the embryos created. So let's see what is the only metric that is stable, not going up, not going down, and is ironic because it is the success rate. In any industry of healthcare services or any industry, the main goal is to improve the success rate of the product, of the service. And in this IVF industry, it's not important to increase the success rate. You can see in right graphic that the success rate has been sustained over 7 years in the same rate, 27% from 26% 7 years ago. And this is optimistic because it's the average. So what kind of industry is not interested in improving their success? What is the only thing that is going down is the price, the average cost per cycle. So those three green metrics are, it's awful to say it, but it's the real thing. It's like the garbage of this industry, the embryos. And what real matters is to transform, to become this industry from a luxury service to a spread market, a popular market. In this graphic, we have the around 15 paradises from IVF to surrogacy. We have in all of them some information like the average cost of IVF, the success rate. They have in common that they have improved the success rate. They are the only ones. So for example, in the United States, we have a city here that is a paradise, global paradise, that is Los Angeles, where the global rate is of 45%. But you can look at the prices, 20,000 the IVF and 175,000 the surrogacy. In comparison, for example, with Iran, that the price is 7.5 thousand for IVF and only 55,000 for surrogacy. So it's very different. And the color is about the risks of exploitation of women in surrogacy. So the most interesting thing about this map is that you can find between the paradises some countries that in the UN are conservatives about abortion or about family, about LGBT issues. So this is a double-sided blade because for one part, IVF will push those countries against their laws regarding the beginning of life. And from the other side, we can push at the UN those countries regarding their conservative posture about abortion. We have, for example, Iran, that is a conservative one, but it has a paradise in Tehran about IVF. We have, for example, Ukraine. We have, for example, Ghana in Africa. That is part of the group of Africa in the UN. So we have here an opportunity and we have here a risk. For example, we can expect in the next years that IVF become for us in topic of life and family defense, not an issue of luxury for only some kind of economies or pockets, but a real with a spread market presence of problem just in comparison with abortion or LGBT issues, because the prices are going low, and that is the trend. And in 10 years, maybe, many people, very easy, can be accessing to IVF. And that is the main goal of the UN outcomes. You will see that in many of them, the only problem that they see, the UN see in the IVF is the prices, is the access with inequality possibilities for people. So let's return. How the UN incorporates IVF into its human rights framework. Across multiple UN documents, ART, assisted reproductive technology, is integrated into reproductive health policies, often tied to two things: bodily autonomy and non-discrimination. It's based always in the interpretation of three rights: the right to health, to non-discrimination, and to the right to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress. Of course, they before categorized the infertility as a reproductive discapacity. So they can circle that into the non-discrimination right. So, however, none of these outcomes mention the destruction of embryonic life, the modification of human reproduction, or the exploitation happening within global surrogacy markets. A significant breakthrough, we got a little success at the UN in 2025 last year with the resolution A-80-158 that condemns surrogacy as a mean of exploitation of women. And that's good because the Achilles heel of the IVF, the bad guy, the bad company, the bad friend of the IVF is the surrogacy. So we can battle with a very good efficiency in the UN, the IVF, through the surrogacy market. And for life and family, let's see a couple of the resolutions. Again, I will share these dashboards with you. We won't have time to see all the information over here, but here we have the 13 main UN outcomes about IVF. They are the most important, and you can see that the most alerting or high alert outcomes were in the past. In 2000 and 2016, they are in red. You will be able to filter by alert, by IVF relation, by normative weight, and you can select the year even. I will share this to you so you can have it and you can play with this and see the information, but these 13 are the main outcomes. Most of them are related with most of them with the Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights Committee, other with the UN FPA, and to the World Health Organization. But most of them have also opportunities, not only risks. For example, we have this one, we already commented, that is favorable, the AT158. And by hover in any bar in this dashboard, you will be able to see the main topic, the category about the alert, how important is this for IVF for us to defending life, how this document is related with IVF. Some of them have direct relations, other indirect, on other implicit relation. And how is the normative weight of these 13 documents? It's important to notice that none of them are hard law. This is good. There is no hard law document that impose IVF to the countries. All of them are soft law. But even in the soft law, we have levels. For example, the score 3 or 3 in the normative weight is referred to treaty interpretations. So it's soft law, but they are interpreting the considerations, the reach of some rights that are an obligation for the countries. At the second level is the political guidance that is not interpreting a treaty, but is important because it has pressure on the international community. And the third level is the technical guidance that is procedures of health for our public systems. So let's focus on this one. Human Fertility Fact Sheet or Infertility Guidelines. This document is very recent, it's from November 2025. And I will update this because when I did it, we had the zero draft of the CSWF, but we could never imagine that the first day we have a vote and an agreed, between both agreed document. So I will update that. But this document is very important because, these guidelines of the WHO are the most recent approach and is actually the most direct and comprehensive UN explicit reference to the IVF. It's very dangerous. It advocates for affordable and accessible treatments, and It's like, oh, I will show you. You can also click to any of these documents, and you will be referring to the website of the UN, to the official document. So you can click anywhere, and you will have all the 13 UN outcomes about IVF. So let's see this one, the guideline of infertility. This document has like 24 recommendations, and like 3 or 4 of them are referred to IVF. And the causes of infertility, like you mentioned several, like the ovaric syndrome, sorry, the polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, the tubal disease, and there are only 3 that they recommend IVF, these 2, and you can guess the other one because Dr. Monique said already, unexplained infertility. So the third is the unexplained fertility. That is a lie, and that is spread over the 70% of the causes of recommendation of IVF in this document. This is serious because this guide legitimizes IVF as a recommended treatment in multiple scenarios. It establishes that addressing infertility is part of the right to health, reproductive rights, and the right to the benefits of the scientific progress, which elevates IVF to the status of a health obligation for states. It's not hard law, but each director of any hospital in our countries, any officer of high level in our health system in our countries will take this guideline and apply it. They are eager to apply these guidelines of the WHO. So it normalizes ART within universal health coverage and elevates IVF to the basic health services in our countries. And it's recent, it's from November 2025. So it rises again the risk that we only saw in 2000 and 2016. And again, 2025, we are in risk again. So for life and family, this is a real problem. We don't have time to analyze the logical map and the interpretative relationships of all the 13 outcomes, but I will share to you some tools for you can do that little by little in your free time. You have, we know that pro-life and pro-family leaders have many free times, so you will be able to. You can scan this QR code, and it will be a full written presentation. And at the bottom of the presentation, you will have the link to the 2 dashboards, to the graphics. I will be updating, and the updates will appear for you. This presentation and the 13 official documents, the PDF of the 13 official documents on IVF. So by concluding, I promise I will conclude right now. Thank you. We just reviewed briefly many awful instruments against life and family, but still, even if you don't believe me, still there is hope. Always there is hope, because we are only the representation of a war that is won in eternity already. By now, we can be sure that there is no universal UN instrument that requires or enforces IVF or ART. Any obligations that may exist do not come from binding universal instruments, but from the right to health and non-discrimination as interpreted by some treaty bodies. In this chess game, we'll still have our queen protected, and castling is not even remotely necessary. We have a path forward, a clear one, to protect human dignity within the UN system regarding IVF, yes, among many other fields on fire. We must promote ethical fertility restoration approaches, advocate preventive strategies to address infertility's root causes, highlight the exploitation within IVF surrogacy markets, As we mentioned, the Achilles heel from IVF is the surrogacy. And finally, ensure that justice frameworks protect life from conception. It's not easy. I know it sounds easy, but our mission is clear: to help the international community recognize the dignity of every human life, including embryonic life, and to ensure that no policy, however well intentioned, undermines the most fundamental rights. And don't forget it, in our side of the table game, we have the king. We have the king that is life and lives forever. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez, for bringing together the policy context and international dimensions of this important issue. We have time for one question, if there's any, two questions, if anyone would like to ask a question. Yes, in the back. Yes, please.
Hi, thank you. First of all, I would really like to thank all the panelists for your insightful presentations. They have been so helpful, and these issues aren't discussed enough. So my question is about policy. In North America, particularly in the US and Canada, it seems that even politicians who oppose abortion are falling into the lie that IVF is an ethical method to combat infertility. We see this through government grants and the expansion of health insurance policies. I'm a Canadian pursuing a law degree in the United States, so I would really like to know, what do we have to do to stop this?
And we'll take the other question in the back, and then I'll just let the panelists briefly answer. I believe it was.
Thank you. It's more of a comment than a question, and it's on the IVF issue, and it might even address what you were asking. Now, I'm with Fertility Business Initiatives, and I promote the Billings ovulation method, and this is a natural, intuitive method for understanding fertility, and it has a 63% success rate with infertile couples. So potentially, it has the potential of taking out the IVF industry as kneecaps, if you know what I mean. So I would like to encourage everyone to learn a little bit more about the Billings ovulation method and see how that can address each of your different approaches and organizations in helping to combat what we're up against with the
Thank you.
IVF. You're welcome.
Would anyone like to answer the first or second question?
About the policy question, I forgot to mention something that is really important, and your question is so great because it is necessary for us to remember this. Even with my topic is the UN outcomes, I need to say that UN outcomes is the less important problem. Because the big problem, the big issue for us is that in general, for example, in the United States, like 60% of American Catholics think IVF is good. And it's the same thing or worse in other countries. So that is a real problem, the culture. So we not only need UN lobbying strategies, the essential, the core of our work, of our mission in the local fields is the educational strategies.
Thank you so much. As we conclude, I want to sincerely thank our panelists for their thoughtful and courageous, meaningful contributions to today's discussion. Your insights, integrity, and dedication are invaluable to the work of the Commission on the Status of Women and the United Nations at large. We are grateful for your leadership and steadfast commitment to defending and protecting human life from the moment of conception. Before we wrap things up, I would like to introduce Andrea Joffrey from Argentina to say a few words.
Hello, everybody. I personally wanted to thank my dear family law professor, mentor, and sometimes mother-like figure, Ursula Basset, for being a part of this conference. and especially for changing her plans and flying in this morning at 6 a.m. Just for this event. And of course, I want to thank her on behalf of CLC. I know it wasn't easy, given that she's a very busy public official in Argentina. So, gracias from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you all for being a part of this important conversation.
Thank you so much. We want to give another special thank you to Campaign Life Coalition and the Human Life International for putting on this awesome, wonderful presentation with such valuable information that all of us need. So can we give them one more round of applause? Thank you.